This week on To the Contrary.
First, dozens of states take aim at abortion rights and women's health. Then, a new immigration proposal that doesn't focus on families. Behind the headlines, turning off the news. One former White House correspondent says women are often tuning out.
Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, the rush to restrict abortion.
The anti-abortion movement is pushing forward with bills that go farther than ever in challenging Roe v. Wade. Several lawmakers are attempting to seize the moment after President Trump's appointment of ultra-conservatives Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch to the bench.
This is part of a coordinated attack on women's health and rights all across the country. And we know what's at stake. It's women's lives. Thousands of women died before Roe versus Wade. And we're not going to go back to that time. What politicians need to realize is that women are outraged. We're paying attention, and we're not going to let this stand.
I just hope that women will get involved, that they will run for office, that they will come together, that they will mobilize. We are a powerful force. We just need to come together and use it.
This year, 7 states, Utah, Kentucky, Arkansas, Missouri, Georgia, Ohio, and Alabama, have narrowed the window for women to get abortions. Alabama's law goes farthest, banning abortion outright.
This is the most extreme ban on abortion that's been passed since Roe versus Wade. We're talking about a ban on abortion at any point in pregnancy with no exception for rape or incest. And doctors who provide abortion care could be put into jail for 99 years, a life sentence.
I never thought sitting in the Alabama State Senate or sitting in the seat of government that we would be in a position where we would be about silencing people, taking away their choice, forcing them to do something with their bodies. And that's all we have is our body, is ourselves. You have taken away that. It's like being in a straitjacket and put in a hole and bury it, alive. You can scream, but nobody hears.
In total, about 30 states have passed abortion laws this year alone, and more could be on the way, with several bills advancing through state legislatures.
So, Congresswoman Norton, will Roe be overturned by this new, more conservative Supreme Court?
Bonnie, the court is a conservative institution in more ways than one. It won't want to use these deliberately extreme and provocative cases to overturn Roe and declare a brand new doctrine.
Look, I don't think there's any doubt that laws that are being passed across the states are trending very heavily in the pro-life direction, and I think one of them is bound to end up at the Supreme Court sooner or later.
We have to be outraged that we have made personal freedom about gender. Personal freedoms need to be blind to gender in this country.
This is no doubt a huge political game. The whole end goal, particularly in Alabama, is to send it right on up to the Supreme Court. They were very open about that. And so that's what they're looking for.
It kind of depends on Chief Justice Roberts, who will split from the majority he did on same-sex marriage. And Kavanaugh's an unknown, and I've been told by 3 or 4 connected conservative women that he will not vote to overturn Roe. However, that said, what do you guys think about those two and what they will or won't do?
Well, I think it all depends on the case that's brought forward, whether it's the Alabama law, whether it's I mean, there's a lot to work with here, shall we say. And so it will depend on the case it's brought forward and the reason that it's brought forward and what the judges will be asked to rule. But let's remember, when we talk about overturning Roe v. Wade, that doesn't mean saying abortion is now going to be illegal all over the country. It means it will go back to the states, which is what it was before Roe. And so it becomes a more narrow decision, in other words, than many people think.
By the way, it's also quite frankly, in certain states like Alabama, it's a post-Roe situation. You can't get an abortion in the state. Either the conservative protesters have chased them out because the clinics become unsafe, they get bombed, people get shot at. So there are about almost a dozen states in the Midwest and the South where abortion is illegal already.
Yeah, it's been very restrictive, particularly in those southern states we're talking about. And that's what leads me to believe that somebody like Justice Kavanaugh may say, kick it right back and say, we're not going to overturn. But I would like to see the states continue to handle this and have this in their hands.
He's not going to kick it back. They're not going to take it. What is going to happen? These cases at the Court of Appeals level have got to, the courts have got to rule against them because they overturn Roe. Then they must decide whether to take the case. It takes 4 justices to decide, and I am predicting that you will not get 4 justices to say just what we were waiting for.
Interesting. I thought it was 5 justices,
no,
but
4 justices decided to take it.
4 out of the 9. So your thoughts on whether Roe will be overturned?
Well, it's a telling situation when Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who actually served, I now work as the Chief Strategic Officer for Legal Momentum, and she once was on the board of Legal Momentum. And back then she was pilloried by the women's movement for having come out and said, this really should be decided on a state-by-state basis and then move forward up to the courts.
Well, because the reason for that, Sam, as you well know, is that it's not clear by any means that progressive women have the means to fight this thing on a state-by-state basis. And that's what conservatives don't tell you, and liberals don't tell you, that if it goes to a state-by-state basis, it's going to be illegal in probably the majority.
But it is on a as we speak,
it is
on a state-by-state basis.
Yeah. Right.
And so there are some women who now have to travel outside of their state in order to get an abortion, and I think the court is going to leave it that way.
Well, our hope, of course, is this catalyzes women across the country. 73% of the nation is in support of women being able to make their own reproductive choices. And
but is this going to mobilize those people?
It seems,
because they certainly have not been mobilized to this point.
The hope would be, now again, Legal Momentum, who was sort of the pioneer behind the Sexual Violence Against Women Act, right? There was a time when no other organization would touch that, right? So it really, as you pointed out, Bonnie, it's a matter of climate, it's a matter of momentum. But I can tell you right now, if all the young women of America, my daughter's age and below, realized suddenly they couldn't have access to birth control, couldn't have access to being able to make their decisions, we would see a sea change.
Bonnie, there are 3 cases pending now before the Supreme Court, far less extreme. For example, 1 abortion clinic only in one of these states. The court is more likely to take one of those cases, and we won't see women come out and get really disturbed until it looks like the court has taken one of those cases.
But do you think most women recognize the fact that, again, we're living in a post-Roe America in about half the country at this point?
Well,
So why bother overturning it, first of all? But secondly, even the situation as it is now, is that it affects low-income women, because high-income women can go to another state or...
And that's actually fallacious. There's been some research around that particular piece. I think I would like to point out what Elizabeth Warren said, right? This is unbelievably cruel, right? As myself having been raped, as my mother having been a victim of incest, right? As myself having been commercially sexually trafficked.
As my mother having had to fly to Cuba in the 50s to have an abortion
imagine having to carry the baby of your rapist, of the father that incested you, and then having to give that rapist, that father, parental rights to the fetus, the pregnancy that you were forced to carry to term. This is unbelievably cruel, egregious, and our hope can only be that women wake up.
However, I think many Americans, including many women, have decided that it's unbelievably cruel that we've killed millions upon millions of unborn children.
Oh, you're not going to start that here, Genevieve.
No. Look, and I think a lot of Americans.
I respect you, but
I respect you, but I think we have a different view. I believe the unborn child.
So you're going to put the health of the mother.
No,
you're going to put
I believe
the
we have
health
two.
of the
Wait,
fetus.
one at a time. Let Sam finish her question.
You're going to put the health of a fetus ahead of the psychological, emotional health of a mother. having been at the receiving end of commercial sexual exploitation and rape and sexual abuse, I still struggle at the age of 62 from healing and recovering from those things. You cannot put the health of a fetus ahead of a woman, a living, breathing woman.
It's a zygote.
You cannot do that. You cannot do that.
And I wouldn't do that. What I would
you are doing
no, what
that.
I
Is
would
what
now,
you're
Sam,
espousing.
let her finish.
What I would say is I believe that you have two human beings here, and what's saying to me is what happened to you and what's happened to many women in those situations is horrible. And I don't know how you ever completely get over that. That is always
you don't,
and that's terrible.
You don't.
But I don't.
But you
think
would force.
taking,
You would
I
force
don't
her to
think,
have a
let me
child
finish.
now.
You would force
I don't
me to
think
have a child.
I don't think taking the life of that child is the answer.
It's not a child.
Because even if
it's a fetus.
that's where you and I disagree.
No,
and I think
medical
that's where
science is on my side.
But I would say that's
Evolution.
where increasingly the debate, I think, is among the public. And you see this in the states. Alabama went all the way to the very beginning. Other states are saying at 8 weeks. Other states are saying the heartbeat. Other states are saying 3 months.
You who espouse
That's
individual
the debate.
freedoms of Americans are saying that the individual freedoms of Americans are fine as long as you're not female.
Let's
That's
get
what you're
Rina
saying.
No,
here.
it's not true.
I see both sides because in 2008, I was shocked when I learned I was working for the only member of Congress at that time who was still against abortion in the case of incest and rape. So in my sort of generation of conservatives, I found an overwhelming sense that in the cases of incest and rape, abortion is still fine because that's something we cannot compel the mother to do. But I also understand the pro-life movement's real argument is that this is a life. But the debate
Is it a life
there.
when it's a zygote? Is that when life, 2 cells?
I have to tell you, in my mid-30s with 2 children, I don't know.
Pro-lifer, you think it's a
and that's why
human
I
being
have that
when
weird
it's 2
answer.
cells.
You know, medical science has already enabled a woman to take a pill before she even knows that she's pregnant, and there it goes. So I think one of the reasons that we're seeing these extreme views come forward is they've seen that medical science has made it possible for women to do their own abortion.
But there's still more than a million abortions a year.
That's right, but science is outrunning them.
1 in 4 American women make the decision to terminate a pregnancy. 1 in 4. So I have to believe there has got to be a tipping point when that right is taken away of personal freedom from a woman that she will stand up and say no more.
And there's no area of men's health that is regulated. It's only women's health.
Thank you.
That
Bonnie,
these
this comes back
regulations
to
Women
God,
have babies,
but we
men
are,
don't.
Well, okay, fine.
Well, that's reality.
Men are half of the equation, okay?
They are.
You could
We ought to hold them responsible
Why
for a
don't
lot of it.
conservatives say men cannot have sex with women if they don't? There should be laws saying, men, you can't have sex with a woman if you're not ready to be a father, and pay for that child.
I wish there were. Okay, we'll find somebody to introduce them.
So that would be the same thing as what Alabama is doing to women now. Let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie Urbay. From abortion policies to immigration.
President Trump unveiled a controversial new immigration law that moves the U.S. away from a system that allows immigrants to choose family for U.S. citizenship candidates. The new policy gives preference to employment skills and education requirements demanded by the U.S. economy. The proposal also includes more money for a border wall, but it's a long way from becoming law.
So, Rina, do you support the idea of immigration based on scholastic and job merit as opposed to because you happen to be the child or mother?
It's a tough question for me. I'm the daughter of 2 merit-based immigrants, people who
merit-based.
Yeah, my dad was, well, not really merit-based, but he would be if he were still alive today, is what I mean. They were highly skilled, had terminal degrees, had something to contribute when they came to America. Everybody that followed after my parents were family. We helped a lot of people come over because we felt that they would contribute to the economy. My demographic is a little bit different. The Indian American community obviously believes in not taking any sort of help. We look within family structures to get help rather than government assistance. We really believe in, elevating our socioeconomic status when we come over here. So it's just really hard for me because my parents, they followed all the rules, and it cost a lot of money to follow all the rules for everybody we helped in my family come after.
Yeah, well, hooray for you. That's not been the story of this country, and I'm not going to come out for that or for the kind of immigration we've had all along, because there's a compromise on the table, for goodness sake. The Democrats said, okay.
Does it have any legs? Even
No,
Republicans are
this
saying,
bill, as the Speaker has said already, is dead on arrival. But the Democrats were willing to negotiate on changes in immigration for DACA. And you know that's right. the immigrant children who came here, being brought here by their parents.
The ones who born here, no other country.
No other country, and didn't choose to come here. That is the kind of thing that any sane Congress would do, and the fact that we won't sit down and do a compromise. So I think it's very harmful to come out and say, well, I know what, merit basis, and that's terrific. Of course it's terrific. And of course we could get that. And we could get that with a sensible compromise that, of course, allowed some immigrants to come in who were typical of Americans for most of the time we've been here, some who were skilled, deal with the DACA kids, and let's call it a day.
But, if Trump, and I recognize that, thinking people have a lot of problems with this president. It's true. It's just true. So
I'm blaming the Congress on this one.
But Democrats are also the basis of the war on poverty, and have spent, since Lyndon Johnson's time, since he declared war on poverty, $50 billion trying to bring people out of poverty. And you know what? It works. But when you bring in 1 million plus uneducated immigrants per year, that's the poverty that's being created today.
That's why I'm advocating.
Do Democrats ever think about that?
Of course, we're advocating, Bonnie, not that everybody be let in, and yes, the country has changed, and yes, we have a different kind of economy. What we ought to be looking at is what kinds of immigrants, what mix of immigrants should be coming in.
That. Yes, I think we need that mix.
Right. Well, and I would say, there are a number of things that I think Republicans and Democrats actually agree on this issue. The challenge is...
did he I wanted to ask you, because 2 weeks ago he said, we're full, the class is closed, and now he wants to leave immigration levels at what they are. That's the Republican Party telling him, don't you dare cut immigration levels, isn't it?
Well, I think there's a lot of voices here. I think a lot of conservatives, a lot of Republicans were very happy with what the president said yesterday. But like I said, there are people from all sides. There are a number of things we all agree on. The problem is we try to put this whole comprehensive thing together, and every time it falls apart. Can we just pass the pieces that we agree on? Yeah. Just those.
Like what?
And then the comprehensive ones.
Name me one piece that we all agree on.
Well, what you were just talking about related to the types of immigrants we allow in and adjusting those numbers, whether 55-33 is the right number, not, we can debate. But there are pieces like that. The immigration system now as it is, visa program now as it is, we all know that
nobody's going to leave the DACA kids.
Wait.
My point is, why not address those pieces? Then let's talk about what do we do about the 11 million, 15 million, whatever number it is that are here. Some of those are DACA, some of them are.
Well, as a legislator, that's not how we do legislation.
But that's why we haven't gotten
the way in which we do legislation in the United States is recognizing there are Republicans, there are Democrats. There's a president. We're from different parties. If you really are serious about legislation, you've got to let the other side have something at the same time that you have.
I'm saying the things that you agree on.
Here I sit in the middle, and I look at the Republicans. The majority of Republicans, I think only a third are for cutting immigration levels. 2/3 are for, and the reason for that is cheap labor. They want cheap labor. There are 40 million people in this country who are unemployed and have dropped out of the unemployment system. Our unemployment levels are not what they put out. So, but if the reason for that is immigrants will do jobs for minimum or sub-minimum wages. There are no jobs Americans won't do for a fair amount of money. And Democrats also want to raise wages for the lowest skilled in this country. So don't those things clash with each other?
But I think when the Speaker of the House says dead on arrival, and he's not getting much support from the Republicans. I apologize. I worship the ground she walks on. I apologize. He's the most productive Speaker of the House in U.S. history, who was never put on the front page of a U.S. magazine. John Boehner showed up on the first day he got on 4 of them, right? So love her. But bottom line, I think the thing we're not saying here is I feel like this is Trump throwing a bone to part of his constituency. And why take a very important, serious issue and obfuscate it like this? And you know what? I know we got problems with immigration, but we're still the #1 immigration nation in the world. Gallup poll does that research every single year. Everybody wants to come here. And guess what? We're the largest economy in the world. There is a
Just
direct correlation. No.
China's catching up.
Yeah, but China's catching it up with 3 billion people, 1 billion, right? They have,
1.2
2 billion people, right? So we have a higher GDP than any other country in the world per person.
But let me. As a cynic, I'm a journalist, I'm a cynic.
You're allowed.
I sit back and I see Republicans being for large numbers of immigrants because they want cheap labor. Democrats want votes, want those people's votes.
Okay, Bonnie, you're stereotyping both sides.
Yeah. Listen, I'm a former.
I plead
fake
guilty
news,
to
fake journalism.
I'm a former.
No, I'm going to finish.
Okay, go for it.
I plead guilty to being a cynical New Yorker, but that as somebody who isn't trying to get a job in the administration or angling for something like that. That's how I see it.
I ran for U.S. Congress in 2008 and had the honor of being the most endorsed challenger in the nation. And my view on immigration was that my uncles and grandparents came here from France and Sweden, right? You can tell which side I take after, right? And they came here with nothing. And they built businesses, and they were very much part of the American economy. Most Democrats are for immigration because we believe in the values etched in the Statue of Liberty. Bring me your tithe. There has to be a country that is a leader and a place of refuge.
But I mean, so many Republicans who have that same that
Yes.
same mentality, those same values are dear. But I think it's about how we're seeing things in this current moment. We're not talking about the real problems like visa overstays. I think there's a lot of false information out there.
That's more than half.
So,
that is more than half.
So, but that's the kind of thing,
Illegal
Bonnie, we could all come together and agree
Yes,
on
we sure
tomorrow.
can. We
Let's
sure
pass legislation on that tomorrow. I think
so
Nancy
tell me
Pelosi,
why,
Donald
because why
Trump
there
both
isn't
agree on
legislation.
this.
Because that is not seen as an issue that is on the table that does not require another issue, because it's not our issue. It's much more of a Republican issue, and that's where you'd have to put DACA on the table, and I think you got
But why
round.
couldn't we
The
just
first
do
round
visa
you're after.
overstays if we all agree with that? Let's just do visa overstays. Then let's talk
Because
about
Democrats want DACA,
Because-
and they're not going to
Well,
do.
but we
let
all
me
wanna
finish.
reform visa
Let me
overstays.
Finish, because Democrats want DACA. That's Republicans want what you're talking about more, and Democrats say, okay,
Precisely.
fine. Well, you give us DACA, we'll go along with you.
That's
on
how
that.
the world operates.
Well, no, I understand, but that's why every time we come to immigration and we do the comprehensive thing, it's failed. It failed under Bush. It failed. All the way back, and they won't bring it up. And I agree with you. The last Congress failed on this. They absolutely failed.
Well, and
the
not only
president was
that,
ready to make a deal.
I was covering the House in the 80s, and in 1986 they passed Simpson-Mazzoli, which was supposed to be immigration reform. And immigration reform is a cover for open the borders.
That was under Ronald Reagan. You're absolutely right.
And we already did it. At that point, we legalized in the 80s 3 million people here illegally. Now it's up to 12. I mean,
And Bonnie, you're
immigration reform should mean changes, not
Our system's
and
so
we're all with
broken.
you.
Right,
And y'all agree.
The point you made is the very one of why the many Republicans and certainly conservatives are saying we're not just going to do amnesty again unless we have real reform, because that's what Reagan agreed to, and all that happened was amnesty was given, the reforms never followed, and so we went from a problem of 3 million people here illegally to 12 or whatever the number is today.
Some think tanks see it as 20 million.
Some
here
do.
illegally.
It's too many. And the reality is it's because the reforms didn't happen, but the amnesty did. And that's why you're not going to see a comprehensive package that
So
follows
this
it.
issue is dead until Democrats take big majorities
Let's do reform,
in both
reform,
houses.
reform.
No, when an issue gets this polarized, one of two things happen. Either the courts decide it, or there becomes a crisis like 9/11 produced a crisis, and then you got people together. And I'm afraid we are going to have to wait for a crisis. By the way, if this seems so bad, study the history of the United States, and you will see that is the way the country operates. It takes some kind of crisis to say to every side, we got to get together.
Well, the rhetoric is so toxic right now. That's what I worry about. Right now, there's a lot of talk of, like, fake asylum seekers, and it's just not a productive conversation that we're seeing in our national discourse right now about immigration. There's so much hate on both sides, I think, and I think most Americans are like us, practical.
What's the hate on the Democrat side?
Well, the fact that they're painting most Republicans as people who don't like anybody.
They don't say bad things.
And the majority of Republicans I interact with have always embraced people of other colors and ethnicities. It's just this sort of, it's being fueled by, I think, the person who's in the Oval Office, unfortunately.
All right, that's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/to the contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.
Going.
Why isn't anybody talking about the problem? Why aren't we talking about